It seems like a good day to start off the video with a good old cold start for the boys. My battery is absolutely clapped on this car, so we gotta use our good old booster pack from Auxito. You guys can get your own booster pack and get 15% off with my discount code, which I'll put on top of the screen, link in the description. This thing's awesome, especially when you got a battery that sucks. I know I need to get a new one. I'll get one eventually. Now that she's running, let me show you guys a life hack. All I did was press a button, and it's Bluetooth, completely wireless. I don't need to use a switch in the car. This exhaust cutout is the best mod I have ever done. But let's get this thing pulled out, and we gotta spin it around, pull it back in the shop the other way, because we got some work to do today, boys. And today is the first day that we get to work in our own shop. I am so freaking excited. We finally got the Honda home. We brought the street bike home. Colton's Evo's here. Right now, I'm helping my buddy Ethan out, and we're storing his Avalanche that he just finished building here. So my truck's parked out front, but today we get to actually work on the Honda in our own garage. I know I said that already and I'm repeating myself, but I still can't get over how freaking crazy this is. 23 years old and I'm working in my own shop. Let's do it. This is the coolest part. Right now I'm driving this out, you guys can't hear anything. If I just decide to push a button like this, then it is open downpipe loud, which is insane. Now to kick off today's video, we're gonna start with an install, which is something we've been needing to do since we set the thing in here, but we've never done it. As you guys can see, we currently have a Bluetooth catch can. And honestly, before this video, these fittings weren't even on here. They're just hand tight because I had to order these off Amazon so that we could get some adapters for some 10AN fittings to fit on our Bullboost catch can. Now, if you guys are running a Bullboost catch can, these fittings are a 10AN to M16 by 1.5 fitting. So the catch can is M16 by 1.5 threads. And then this is the 10AN barb that we're gonna run to a fitting right here, which is gonna go up to the 2 ports on our valve cover. First steps of installing this catch can, we're gonna get this breather taken off here because we don't want this spraying oil on our turbo. If it ever starts to push excessive crankcase pressure up into the valve cover, we want it going into our catch can, not venting the atmosphere all over our engine bay. Then we got our little plug here, which comes with the Jacksmania Racing valve cover set. I'm just putting some assembly lube on this to lube up the O-ring before we get her slapped in there. And it's got an O-ring on it, so that assembly lube is basically just gonna help on the way in so that you don't rip the O-ring or anything like that when you're tightening it up to the valve cover. Get her nice and snugged up. Now we got that port completely blocked off. Now we're gonna take our 3/8 hex and loosen off our front vent ports. And now we can get to the purpose of this video, which is showing you guys how to run a catch can on your turbo 8th gen Civic SIs. Now you can do this a couple different ways, but I'm gonna show you guys the way that I'm gonna do it. At the end of the day, you just need a ventilation to atmosphere to make sure that you're not building pressure in the system. And you need a vent from the valve cover and from the crankcase, venting to either the atmosphere or to your catch can. So in our scenario, what we're gonna do, since we have a 2-port catch can with no vent on it, it's a completely enclosed catch can, we're gonna be running 2 vents from the valve cover straight to our catch can, and then we're gonna be running the factory PCV straight to atmosphere. So that way, the crankcase is getting the atmospheric vent, and then any excess pressure is going from the valve cover. It's gonna push it all out. Any excess oil or anything like that's gonna go into our catch can. I just explained that so bad, but you guys get the point. Then on the valve cover, we're gonna have to block off the little vacuum nipple because we do not want our intake sucking in oil, because that's dumb. Both of these adapters that I got in my hands are a 10AN to 10AN adapter because the Jacksmania Racing valve cover is threaded for 10AN ports. Now I'm gonna grab our fancy Evil Energy AN wrench because I don't wanna scratch these fittings because they're right on the front of the engine and I want them to look pretty. So you just set this wrench to 10AN and then it is the exact size of a 10AN fitting. And you can start tightening her in until that fitting bottoms out and the O-ring is nice and sealed. I set the wrench a little bit bigger than 10 mil so that it's easier to get on and off. Right there, she's nice and tight. Next thing we're gonna do is get our fittings installed in the catch can itself so that we don't gotta take these off no more. Put a little bit of assembly lube on the O-ring. And these M16 by 1.5 to 10AN fittings, I just got off of Amazon. Can't remember the company that makes them. They're not Evil Energy ones, but I will link them in the description for you guys so you can get them for your setup if you guys are running a Bullboost catch can. Because for this catch can setup, especially where I'm mounting it, these work perfectly. Now, I'm gonna have to hold this catch can because this mount is not the most solid thing in the world. And right there, she's nice and tight. Now, you don't have to use assembly lube on O-rings. I'm just using it because it's what I have. You just use regular engine oil or Vaseline or whatever. Literally, all you're trying to do is ensure that the O-ring doesn't get cut when you tighten it onto the catch can. There's also a drain plug on the bottom of these Bullboost catch cans, which is convenient for if you want to drain it. You could run even a drain hose fitting if you want on the bottom of the catch can with like a little valve so that you can open it and drain it whenever you want. And then you could run the hose to wherever. But I'm just gonna leave the plug in it because I am pretty hefty on the maintenance with my cars and I will check on it all the time to make sure and see if it's full. All right, there we go. Now, while we're here, I'm gonna show you guys this setup that we're going with here and how we're gonna make this all fit because the belt is obviously right frickin' there. This is a very, very tight setup when it comes to the space that you have to make it work. But we got these 45-degree 10AN fittings here that are gonna make this a breeze and make it look like it's supposed to be like this. So first off, the only thing that really gets in the way is this AC bracket. And if I'm being honest with you, I wanna run the AC bracket because I'm running AC in this car. Everything's basically factory in this car other than the turbo kit. So we got one 45-degree fitting here that's gonna be running a hose to one of these valve cover vents. And then the other one here is just barely clearing this AC line. And then either I can run the hose over top of the whole engine bay, or I'm debating turning this down and running the hose underneath the intake manifold, then having it come down around the manifold on this side underneath the throttle body, and it'll come up under the fuel line here into a 90-degree fitting right there. So that fitting would go down this way, and then this fitting would come over this way. That way it still leaves this whole area nice and open. We don't have any hoses running over top of anything. Another thing about building these AN fittings is I don't have an air compressor in this shop yet, so I can't use a regular like straight die grinder style. I got a cordless angle grinder here, so we're gonna try that out. I've never done it with these before, so we'll see what happens. In the near future though, we definitely need to get an air compressor. And I need a bigger vise because we just got a little baby one. But we got our AN line, our adjustable AN wrench, and we got our 90-degree AN fitting. We're gonna start with the good old Jack Spania Racing AN fitting. So first up, you're gonna cut your AN line so that she's nice and straight, which shouldn't be too bad to do. Let's see how this grinder handles it. Also, wear safety glasses when you guys are grinding AN lines because they have little tiny metal pieces in them and they can definitely get in your eyes. Now what I do with AN fittings is first off, I'll cut off all the frayed parts with just regular scissors. And then I use a butane torch and just burn it so it's nice and flat. And now we've got a nice flat AN fitting to work with. Now once you get your AN fitting built, you're gonna take whatever you got to lube this thing up, and you are gonna put a little bit of it inside of the line. Now, one thing that I forgot about actually is I usually use compressed air and blow out the inside of the line. In this case, I don't have an air compressor, so I don't really know what I'm gonna do to blow air in there. But we can get the end of this AN line fully seated, which you just take this capped end piece, shove it onto the line as far as you can until it bottoms on the inside. And then now I take the line and put it in the vise. Then I like to lube up the threads on the AN fitting as well so that she glides in there nice and smooth. Now you get your 90-degree put on there and get her threaded in just like that. Super easy. This is why I like the adjustable AN wrench, because you can just adjust it to the size of whatever you're dealing with, whether it's 10 AN, 8 AN, 6 AN, 12 AN, it does it all. And I'm scratching the shit out of this fitting because this vise does not have a rag in it because I'm dumb. Now I like to tighten AN fittings to the point where they are even, the hexes are even, which is about right there. And I definitely did scratch this fitting a little bit. Just give the hose a good tug, make sure it doesn't come out of there after, and we already got one end built. So now, since this is all the AN hose that we got, we're gonna take this and we're gonna go install it into the car, mark our line with a white paint pen, then we'll get the other end installed, and it's gonna be the same process for all of them. So let's get this catch can set up from the valve cover to the catch can, finish up, and then we can hop into doing the PCV line. boys, we have officially done it. We have a catch can. Well, at least the vent setup so far from the valve cover. We haven't done the PCV yet. So obviously you guys can see this full line, and I did freaking scratch the fitting, but whatever. She's a sleeper anyways. It's gonna have nicks. It's gonna have dings in it. It's not supposed to be perfect. That is the point of this build. But this hose comes out on this 90-degree fitting, does a nice bend, goes into the 45, which goes into the catch can. And that line is nice and secure. That's not gonna touch the belt whatsoever. So that's perfect. Then we got a 45 that comes down underneath the AC bracket. I decided not to come up over, because if I did, that 90-degree fitting would be going straight over top of the fuel pressure gauge. And when the car's running on the dyno, I would like to see the fuel pressure gauge. So I don't wanna have a line covering it. So I opted to go underneath the AC line. It routes underneath the intake. There's lots of slack in the line, but it's never gonna touch the rad fans. Then it goes underneath the rad hose. It comes up underneath this intercooler coupler that goes to the throttle body, comes up between the intake for the turbo, and then to our 90-degree fitting right to the catch can. And from up top, I think that this looks super clean. Now we gotta finish up this catch can setup, which is the PCV. On K-Series engines, the PCV valve sits right down there, and it vents from this bracket, which bolts up and seals to the whole engine block. Now, there is a vacuum line on there, which you guys can see right there. It comes off that fitting and goes straight into this nipple on the intake manifold. So what we're gonna be doing is removing that line. We're gonna cap off the nipple on the intake manifold, and then we are gonna remove that PCV valve. Not sure what size it is yet. We're gonna get that taken out. Then from what I was reading online, that PCV vent is a 3/8 NPT thread pitch. So I picked up a 10AN to 3/8 NPT adapter. That way we could put some thread sealant on there. We could thread that into that piece, and then we could run a 10AN line straight off here, run it down to the bottom of the engine bay and vent it to atmosphere with this leftover 10AN line that we got from when we built the valve cover lines. So let's get the PCV line completely removed out of there, and then I gotta find a vacuum cap to cap off that fitting, and I'll show you guys the final product, and we'll talk about why we have to remove the factory PCV. Okay, that was kind of a pain to do, if I'm being honest, but we got her all dialed in. I even swapped the P-clip that was all rusty on our AC line bracket for a brand new P-clip, so that looks all nice and pretty. But the thread pitch on the factory PCV is not 3/8 NPT. And if I'm being honest with you, I don't really know what it is. I had a barb fitting here that was the same thread pitch as the PCV valve that I took out. So I put some thread sealant on it, swapped the factory crush washer over from the factory PCV onto my barb fitting, threaded it in there, got her nice and tight, put a 5/16 hose with a spring clamp on there, and then ran the hose down in front of the alternator. Kind of tough to see, but you guys can see it go past the alternator there. And then it's going down by the rad fans. And now we're at a point where we are going to have to lift the car up so I can secure it underneath so it's not gonna hit the rad fans or the belt or anything that spins in that area. But damn, look at this setup, boys. This engine bay is looking better and better every single time we work on this car. Now, one thing that kind of does suck about this shop, if I'm being honest with you guys, is that we can only really film from this side of the car. I can't put the camera on that side because it's so tight to the wall. I wish there was a door in the middle of the shop and the hoist was just in the middle of the shop. You could try and squeeze two cars on either side of the car that's in the middle with the two post, but it does kind of make the most sense to put it here. It just sucks for YouTube videos. And you gotta use wood blocks on this hoist, or else you gotta drive the car so far forward. Like, this hoist could easily be another 2 feet back, and we wouldn't have to be so tight towards the front of the shop. But there is a reason that I built little wood blocks put underneath this thing so that we can lift it up a little bit further back. Dude, this is the coolest thing ever, having my own hoist in my own garage. I'm gonna show you guys the coolest part about this whole setup and what we're gonna do here with these lights. Whenever we're working under the car, we can give you guys these cool shots where we drop the lights down and then we can angle them up, flick them on, and then we can get some wicked lighting underneath the car. I'm curious to see how this actually looks. All right, let's test it out. It is lit under here, dude, and there's coolant right there, but I fixed that leak off camera. But I haven't wiped the coolant off yet. Sits on the intercooler pipe. All these rad hose connections on the CX racing kit, for some reason, they frickin' leak and then they stop leaking and then they leak and then they stop leaking. Like, I don't get it. This lower rad hose was leaking, so I tightened the hose clamp a whole bunch and then it started leaking again. And then I was like, okay, I'm gonna double hose clamp it. And then guess what? It's not leaking again. So I ain't gonna fix what's not broken. But while we are underneath the car, we got 2 tasks here. Task number 1 is to finish the job that we started. Here is our hose that we ran for the PCV. So our PCV is basically just gonna dump to atmosphere right underneath the car. And this is perfect because that hose that I had was 5/16. It was the perfect length. It goes just past the subframe so that any of the vapors will just dump straight to atmosphere here. Kind of like the competition series AOS on my Subaru. So all I'm gonna do is zip tie this right here to the low pressure AC line that goes to the compressor right there, and then that will be nice and secure. It'll just hang out just like that. Then the other thing I wanted to mention while I was down here is this exhaust. Now that we've been running it a little bit, I've been driving the car around town on the base map. Our welds are starting to get some color. I don't see any rust happening, but they're getting some color up there. These are my welds on this side. This one is my welds too. They actually look not bad. I mean, not as good as the Amazon special welds and these evil energy parts, but for a MIG weld, they're not too bad. The other thing is the exhaust isn't scraping on the ground when I go over big bumps, but this V-band scraped once, and when I went off-roading in her, we got some dirt in the V-band there. But the last thing I need to do to clean up this exhaust is I don't like the way that this cord's sitting here loose. So the 2 factory studs here for the rear O2 sensor will work for me to mount it. I'm just gonna put a P-clip right here and put a nut on that stud. My idea with this is to clip the harness so the harness doesn't move, and then the wire will be nice and secure and the connector will never come undone. Whether that works or not, I don't know, but that's the idea. That is not going anywhere, and this wire will never touch the exhaust. Perfect. Look at how clean this whole setup is. Goes through the factory rear O2 sensor grommet. We got a P-clip holding the harness. Harness goes right into the solenoid up top there. Doesn't touch the frame. And our exhaust cutout is all V-bends. I can take this off anytime I want. Goes right up to our downpipe with the heat wrap protecting all of the electric power steering wires there. This setup is mint. And the underside of this car is surprisingly clean for 200,000 kilometers. I mean, there's some surface rust starting on the pinch welds, so we'll have to get this thing cleaned up if I'm gonna keep the car. But for now, I just wanna have fun with it. Now let's get this line secured. So literally the only reason I'm securing this is so it doesn't hit rad pans and stuff, or else I would leave it where it is. But I don't want a hose getting caught in a rad fan or on a cert belt. What I should do is put a little filter on the tip of this hose, but it's never gonna go under vacuum, so it's not gonna suck in water or anything. So it ain't a big deal. This hose even has like a decent curve to it, so it just kicks out right here next to the intercooler pipe. You don't even see it. I just gotta snip the zip tie. Our catch can setup is complete. I like it. Now here's what we gotta do in this shop to get some space. This booster pack is actually the best thing ever. The engine bay in this car is officially, unofficially complete. Off the top of my head right now, I can't think of anything else we need to do up top other than a boost leak test to throw this car on the dyno. And that's what you guys have been waiting for, and that's what I've been waiting for, and I am excited. For all you boys that have been in the comments asking when the dyno day is, right now, the dyno day is booked. It's not next Friday, it's the Friday after that from the time I'm making this video. So by the time you guys see this video, it'll be the next Friday. It's on April 26th. That's the only day we could get in. Matt has been absolutely booked up like crazy. So we got our appointment booked and I'm excited about it. I'm also nervous. We are gonna do some e-tuning before we put it on the dyno just to make sure everything on this kit is solid before we spend the money to strap it down on the dyno. But yeah, I just wanted to get that out of the way because I know you guys have been commenting, when's the dyno day? April 26th. The video will be out a week after the 26th, which is when it's going on the dyno. Or maybe I'll get it up sooner because I'll be excited to edit that one. I don't know. Anyways, the reason I'm setting the camera up here is because I want to explain to you guys what this factory PCV does. If I shake this thing near the mic so you guys can hear it, you can hear that there is a little spring ball valve inside of this thing. And basically, what that does is right now, it is completely sealed, completely blocked off. Can't push anything past it. This vacuum nipple goes to the vacuum nipple on the intake manifold, which I showed you guys earlier in the video. And the way that it works is the engine creates vacuum at idle, and it creates pressure when you're ripping on it. Because you're a boosted car, your manifold pressure is gonna rise as you give it more throttle, as the turbo creates more boost. So what this valve does is when the engine goes under vacuum, it opens this valve up because the vacuum is sucking the air away from this barred fitting, which means it is pulling that plunger inside of this PCV valve up, which in turn is opening the air passage. So any of the crankcase fumes, any oil, anything like that that's getting thrown around in there is gonna come up through this valve, and then that line is going straight into your intake, which essentially means if you have any blow-by, if you have any issues in your cylinders where there is oil getting pushed through the crank vents, that is going straight into your intake, which is not good. And this is why people install catch cans. When your engine is under pressure, not vacuum, that pressure is gonna push this valve shut. It's gonna close it off so that no crankcase pressures can just push constantly out of this valve. But under vacuum, it's gonna suck it in. So what we did now is we have a barred fitting on there that's wide open. There's no valve to seal or shut it whatsoever. We have a catch can with 2 vents on the valve cover. Your valve cover, believe it or not, and that crankcase vent are all connected. The head is bolted to the engine, your valve cover and your engine block oil passages are all linked together. That's how the head gets oil from the oil pump that's bolted to the block. So those crankcase pressures need to be equal in the short block and in the head to make it a full long block. So since we have 2 vents on the valve cover here in our baffled Jacksmania Racing valve cover, those vents are what is gonna push any excess pressure into the catch can. Now, since we don't have a vent on our catch can, our crankcase vent is our atmospheric vent. So if you run a 3-port catch can, you could run the crankcase vent and both valve cover vents to a 3-port catch can as long as there is a filter on it or some sort of air source that vents to atmosphere. There needs to be an atmospheric vent or else you're just gonna build pressure and you're gonna blow seals out of your engine. So in this case, since we have a 2-port catch can, we use the crankcase vent as our atmospheric vent. And since we have that hose running to the ground, yeah, we aren't meeting emissions whatsoever, but honestly, you think we're meeting emissions with this big old Terpsky sitting here? No, probably not. So there's my rant about catch cans and PCV systems. Let's go ahead and take care of one of the things that you guys have been roasting me about in the comments for so freaking long on this car. That headlight right there needs a polish. But it's late and I gotta work in like 4 hours and I'm not gonna get any sleep, so I'm gonna go to bed. We're gonna do this another day, but it's gonna be in the same video, so see you guys in 2 seconds. You guys can finally leave me alone in the comments. For not even sanding those whatsoever, that was just a polishing compound, these look a million times better. I honestly almost wish that I didn't polish the left headlight because now that one looks way better than this one, but the passenger side one looks way better than it did before. There's still a little tiny bit of haze in it, but for the most part, it's pretty clear. I'm probably gonna get new headlights eventually. So in my opinion, that is good enough for now. The stuff that I used was this Meguiars PlastX stuff, or PlastX. It's just for removing cloudiness and oxidization on plastic surfaces, and it worked really, really good on headlights. It's a 1-stage compound, and I think it was like 10 bucks. So for 10 bucks, I don't think you're getting better results than that. Unless you wanna buy a full kit and sand your headlights and get rid of all the pitting on them and make them look pretty. But she's a daily, so honestly, I don't really care to make this thing look like absolutely perfect. It's just supposed to be a fun car that's turbo. I can rip on it on the highways when I want, but I can still start it every morning and drive it to work. Colton is in the shop working on his Evo right now because we're gonna get started on that build series right after this thing hits the dyno. But me and Colton were just talking and I told him that this Honda, to me, is exactly what I just said. It's like a fun car. I don't have to worry if I get too close to a semi-truck on the highway, like for rock chips or anything like that. The paint's not nice. There's little chips all over the place. Like look at the chips right there, right on this quarter panel, right in front of the headlight. There's little rust spots all over the place on this car. There's so much oxidization on the intake manifold, on the tensioner bracket, just all over the place on this thing. Like look under the hood. I'm probably gonna pressure wash that, but that's nasty. And the best part about it is that is okay, because that's what it's meant for. That's like
this thing fucking might actually go up to like 16 or 17 pounds, like if we take it all the way to 8,600.
holy shit. Well, as long as I don't send a rod to the moon.